So good morning everyone, and thank you for joining us. My name's Harriet Adams from Content and Code. I'll briefly go through who we are shortly. I won't bore you all with the details. But I'm here today to talk about Office 365 deployment, and then more importantly how you can actually make it work for your business. So on the agenda today, I will quickly run through about who Content and Code are. Then I will follow that with an Office 365 overview. So what is the Office 365 service and what does it actually include? I'll then talk about the deployment process and talk about how actually this works in real life, together with some real life examples. Then I'll talk about the fast track promotion that Microsoft have on at the moment, about how it can get you started on your road to the Office 365 migration. And then I'll hand over to John, who will then be able to take you through some licensing slides. So a little bit about us. So Content and Code focus primarily on Microsoft technologies. In fact, that's the only technologies we deal with, specifically Office 365 and SharePoint. We actually partner with Bytes to provide a seamless experience across licensing and implementation. What this really means is that we work very, very closely with your licensing managers here at Bytes. And what this means is that from procuring licensing to deploying the Office 365 service, we can ensure that you are only dealing with one point of contact at any point in time, and that if you have any questions, they're going to the right expert. And the main focus of our business is to drive success through user adoption. So what this really means is, in practice, we understand that people choose a technology for a reason, but actually when it comes to deploying a solution, it's not about the technology. In fact, 80% of the success of a project is all to do with how your users adopt it and what the take-up is. So that's what we focus on when it comes to rolling out projects. So now I'm going to go through a brief overview of Office 365. Some of this you may know already, and some of it you may have seen before, but hopefully there'll be some new stuff in here, and if you have any questions, please feel free to post them and we'll answer those at the end. So the first thing to really talk about is some of the trends in the environment that we work in at the moment. I think when I go and see a lot of our clients that we deal with, the one thing that's prevalent is the bring your own device policies that users are pushing for. You know, people at home have iPads, have Surfaces, have Android tablets, have a myriad of devices, and they want to be able to use those in a working environment. Now, the problem from an IT perspective is, how do you lock those down? How do you ensure that they are secure? How do you ensure that your users are getting to the data that they need in order to be the most efficient, but at the same time keeping the control of all of your sensitive information within your organization? The second thing is about people. So we have, shiny new graduates who are joining our organizations straight out of university who, maybe don't really use email for anything. They use methods such as Twitter and LinkedIn and Facebook to communicate, texting, but they're not used to going into an environment where email is primarily the communication platform. And on the other side of that, we actually have people who, maybe have, in their 70s, have been around for a long time, have seen technology change and grow, but, not to generalize, but sometimes they may be, they might find it more difficult to adopt new technologies. And the reason why this is really important is because you want to be able to provide your users with a seamless experience, no matter the device that they're accessing it from, or the method that they choose to connect. So whether that's locally on a laptop via connecting to email via Outlook, or whether that's through the web browser or via a mobile device, you want to make sure that the end user experience is the same. So train once for all platforms. And the other trend really is that most of the clients that I speak to now are at least have some technologies that they are starting to put into the cloud, because quite often it's a cheaper and better solution than what they can deploy on premises. So the way that the working world is moving is impacted by all of these three trends, and the sooner you start thinking about how your business can incorporate all of these ideas, the better. So just moving on briefly to the productivity vision for the Office 365 suite. I've already touched on the best experience across all devices. So whether that's different browsers that you support internally, perhaps you have a financial services application that needs to run on Firefox, for example, or whether that's accessing it from an iPad, you want to make sure that all of your users have the same experience across all of those devices, and they can get to the information that's relevant to them. And the other side of this is this idea of cloud on your terms. And we'll talk about this a little bit later on when I get onto some of the real life examples. But really, there will be some organizations out there that, for compliance reasons, cannot put some information within the cloud right now. Maybe that will change in the years to come, but at this moment in time, there will be some information that you cannot put into the cloud. Now, in practice, it doesn't actually matter, but as long as the end user experience is seamless. What I'm really talking about here is, maybe you have some very sensitive data that needs to remain in specific mailboxes on premises, and maybe the rest of them you can put into the cloud. As long as you know that the information that is secure is kept in a safe environment and everything else is stored within the cloud, it doesn't matter, because your end users need to have that seamless experience. And this again could be for different workloads. Maybe you want to keep Lync on premises, for example, or maybe you have already have a SharePoint installation on premises that you want to keep in. Again, it's the end user interaction that needs to be seamless. So the Office 365 service itself covers lots of different workloads. So we first start with messaging, which we all know as Exchange, voice and video, or Lync. There's content management, or SharePoint, the enterprise social functionality from Yammer, and the reporting analytics. If you've had a look at Power BI, are definitely worth having a look at. And of course, there are other services you can tack onto this. So if you're looking at, an ERP system, Project Online is also available, delivered through the cloud. The same with a CRM system, so CRM Online is available. But the idea across all of these workloads is, again, it's integrated. So I'm sure John will go on to talk about this a little bit later. And, for me, not a licensing expert, sometimes the Microsoft licensing world does boggle my mind slightly. But what Microsoft have done in this new environment is they've split the types of workers in your environment into two different types. From the old world, or in the on-premises world, there used to be this idea that, everyone had to have either a standard or enterprise license. Microsoft now recognize that actually in the environment, you don't always have the same types of workers. So you have this idea of an information worker, probably like most people on the call, whenever further than about 10 meters away from a mobile device at any one moment in time, constantly checking emails. And what we're doing is we are creators of content. So sending emails, creating documents, we're always attached to a device at any one point in time. And you've also got this idea of a kiosk worker. Now, a kiosk worker might be someone on a factory floor, or someone who works in a retail unit, somebody who is a consumer of content. So maybe logs onto your corporate intranet to read some policies, or maybe fill in a form to request some time off, or maybe, logs in a couple of times a week just to send a couple of emails to some colleagues, but they are real consumers of content rather than creating it. And the difference between these is actually that there's a flexibility here. So you don't have to use the full Office 365 license if the user doesn't actually need it. And Bytes are very, very well placed to be able to help you do some user profiling in your environment to work out where your users sit. So from an information worker perspective, you get a 50 gigabyte mailbox. And from a kiosk worker perspective, you get 2 gigabytes. Included in this, you get the options for voicemail and unified messaging. So if you currently have Cisco systems or something similar on premises that you need to integrate with the Office 365 service, that will still work in the new world. Integrated personal or advanced archiving. So the difference between these, and this is for an information worker, is that either a user will have a personal archive, which takes up part of the 50 gigabyte space, so the users can, sort their own mail. Maybe they only want to have a year's worth of mail in their mailbox at any one time. But all of this information is available whether you're accessing through Outlook or whether you're accessing through the browser through OWA without needing to have any add-ins or anything else. Or you've got this other option for an advanced archive. Now, the advanced archive is really what is powering the in-place hold functionality within the Office 365 service. So this is an unlimited archive on top of the 50 gigabyte mailbox. If you turn on in-place hold in the mailbox, any mail that is purged from deleted items or is changed and then forwarded to another party within your organization, that information will be kept within a secret folder within that unlimited archive. And the other thing this powers is the ability to place a mailbox and in-place hold and then remove the license altogether. Now that mailbox will then stay there stateless, so that means no inbound or outbound mail coming in to that mailbox, but it's still searchable in your environment by the administrators for as long as your retention period. So this is really good for when you start thinking about what happens to leavers within the environment. You know, you don't want to start paying for a mailbox if it's not actually in use. You might have a retention policy of 3 years, it might be 10 years. If you're having to think about what to do with those leavers, then this is the ideal option for you. Full active sync and BlackBerry Business Cloud services. So some of you out there may be using mobile device management already in order to facilitate bring your own devices, as I talked about earlier. But Active Sync is the ability to connect Windows devices and iOS devices and Android devices to the service, and it has some mobile device management features built in, such as remote wipe and complex password enforcement. And the other side of this is the BlackBerry Business Cloud services. So BlackBerry Business Cloud services is essentially a BES server that sits within the Office 365 service, and it's free. So a lot of organizations that I go and talk to, this is quite a nice win for them, because actually it means that they can get rid of their BES server on premises if they're still supporting BlackBerry. The ability to protect your information, and I know that's probably a question that comes up quite a lot. Exchange Online Protection is anti-spam, anti-malware, antivirus. Again, some of our clients decide to get rid of their existing solution and use this as an option. And data loss prevention policy. So again, locking down your IP, making sure that users accessing the service aren't going to let any sensitive information out of your environment by preventing people from sending sensitive information such as credit card details. The next thing, instant communications and web meetings. So really what we're talking about here is Lync Online. So this is instant messaging and presence across firewalls. So I could be sat, as I am at the moment, in the Bytes office, and I can speak to people in Bytes, even though we are different organizations, because we've allowed that communication across premises. PC to PC voice and video calls, online meetings with desktop sharing, so the ability to share your desktop, share PowerPoints with up to 250 people from outside your organization as well, without needing to have a Lync license. And you've also got the Windows Live and Skype Federation, so these have just been merged, and what this means is that me as an end user, I can sit and speak to people on Skype from outside of the organization if my administrators allow me to do so. But actually all of that information is still being recorded on premises, and my administrators still have administrative control over who I can speak to, be able to search that content if necessary. So here's where I've tried to fit everything about SharePoint onto one slide, which is always a challenge. But the first thing that we've got is intranet solutions. So intranet is a difficult word these days because it can describe so many different things, and it really depends on what you're using your current intranet for. It could be everything from knowledge management, wikis, it could be corporate comms, news, all of these things, but SharePoint is very, very good at doing all of these things out of the box. Each user will also get a personal site to manage and share their documents. Now behind the scenes, actually what's happening is, if any of you are familiar with SharePoint from previous years, it's a SharePoint My Site. It's now been named OneDrive for Business, not to be confused with the public-facing OneDrive which you get with an Outlook.com account. This is contained within SharePoint. Every single user gets 1 terabyte, or up to 1 terabyte of their own personal storage to manage and share documents internally or externally if you let them as well. And what we see is a massive uptake in this to replace things like Dropbox or Box or something similar, which is not under administrative control and is personal to the user. And this is a really quick win for quite a lot of organizations. The ability to synchronize documents offline. So any of you out there familiar with Groove or SharePoint Workspace from previous years, this is the newest incarnation of this. And what this allows me to do is synchronize my personal site and also any document library from SharePoint Online offline. So it means that if I'm not connected to the internet, if I'm on a train or something similar, I can still continue to work in an efficient manner without needing to be connected. Document level permissions. So again, if anyone's familiar with SharePoint in the past, end users sometimes found contributor, designer, all of these different SharePoint permissions quite confusing. It's been much more simplified in the new version. So the ability to let users just choose whether they want other users to just view or edit documents. Share documents securely with extranet sites. So SharePoint Online comes with 10,000 partner access licenses for free. This means that you can invite people from outside of your organization to collaborate with you, and really is a replacement for things like extranets. But it's still contained within the SharePoint platform. So again, from an administration perspective, the ability to go into those SharePoint sites and search is really useful. Social capabilities with Yammer. I'm not going to spend too much time talking about Yammer because it does so many different things, and it's a very powerful tool if you've already got it in place. But we're seeing huge uptake in this from the social enterprise world to help with things like training, and I'll talk about this a bit later. But what about if you're initiating a project, having Yammer as a self-help tool for users to ask each other questions instead of bombarding your support team with those questions. And again, this is all protected with things like information rights management. So the ability to prevent people from taking screenshots of your IP, saving it locally, all of these things you can do within the platform as well. Office productivity. So as you may or may not be aware, you can have the full Office suite included with the Office 365 licensing, and it's per user licensing. So what this actually means is that every user gets 5 downloads of what is Office 2013 at the moment, but it's evergreen, so you'll always have the rights to the next download. That's from a PC or Mac basis, but you also have the ability to download mobile apps as well, and I'll come on to that shortly. It's all integrated nicely with Office 365, so the default save location, for example, is either your OneDrive for Business or SharePoint. And you also get Office Online, or what used to be known as Office Web Apps, as part of this. And Office Mobile. So if you haven't seen any of the mobile applications available for use with Office 365, actually it's a very broad range of applications. Everything from the OWA app for iPhones, which allows you to view other people's calendars and to set you out of office, really important things like that people like to do all the time. That's available on iOS devices for iPad as well, and you may or may not have seen that Office is now available for iPad. So with Office 365 you get the rights to be able to create and edit documents from that application as well. But there are also a myriad of other apps available for Androids and iPhones and Windows phones as well. So just on to the deployment process. And this is really important and fundamental to understanding how you're going to roll out Office 365. The first thing that you really need to do is understand your business objectives. This might be from a broad range of people across the business. Understand what the goals of the business are in terms of your strategy for the next 3 to 6 years. Is cloud something you're looking at? Lots of people see specifically things like email and it's messaging a commodity now. It does it very well off the shelf, but is this something that you're driving towards? And as part of this, understand the language of your business as well. It's all well and good someone saying, oh, I want a new communications platform, but understanding what that actually means. Does that mean instant messaging? Does that mean desktop sharing? Does that mean the ability to make audio and video calls? Or does it mean email platforms? Does it mean a place on your intranet where people can share ideas? It's really important to understand the language of the business. The second thing I would say is focus on your quick wins. So once you've looked at the Office 365 service as a whole, understand where will make the biggest difference. Where should the investment be first in order to get the quickest return on investment from it? And the third thing is, make sure you've prepared your users and support teams. How will the project affect your users? What do they need? What do they want? How will you ensure end user adoption? How will your support team cope with the change? And fundamentally, it's not just a technical solution we're talking about. Business readiness is really key to a success of a project like this. So the way that we would typically look at doing an Office 365 project is to firstly split this into 3 phases. So you have a plan phase, a prepare phase, and a migrate phase. The plan phase is really focused on, the strategy. So we talked about the business goals. What are you trying to achieve and where are the quickest wins? What's the timeline for the rollout? How are you going to support this moving forwards? Discovery. So, what do you have in your organization? Where can we make some savings? Are there any costs that we can negate by moving things to the cloud? And then breaking each of the components down into a bit more detail. So let's look at Exchange, or let's look at Lync, let's look at SharePoint. How are your users going to access all of the services from inside your network, from outside the network? Do you have any two-factor authentication requirements, for example? And all of these are, quite modular, so we can do these at different stages throughout the project. The prepare phase, which is all about, deploying prerequisites. Is there any Active Directory remediation that we need to think about? Maybe you're on a different platform altogether. Maybe you're on a notes platform. What kind of things do we need to think about? But it's also about training and communications and governance and, making sure that the business is prepared for the change that is going to happen. And then we have the migrate phase, which, is what it says on the tin. Moving platforms into the Office 365 solution and making sure it's seamless. Now you'll see underneath here is another orange arrow that we saw Yammer rollout / support. And I mentioned this briefly earlier, but actually Yammer is a really, really good tool for doing this. Providing users a place to go and talk about projects that are upcoming. Maybe it's a place for your CXOs in your environment to get excited and drive user adoption of the platform, but also making sure underlying that your support team prepared and that you have the support mechanism in place from the prepare phase onwards, which is really, really vital. So I'm just going to talk through some real-life examples, and these are both Content and Code and Bytes clients here. So if you've got any questions about these, please do ask. The first one, ASOS. So everyone's quite familiar with ASOS. They're approximately 1,400 users, UK-based. They're an online fashion store. Last year, I think they had a £1 billion turnover as well. Now they were reliant on a 2003 Exchange platform, and there was no real owner of the environment. Everything was kind of siloed, and it meant that users were complaining, they were having problems talking to each other, there was a huge amount of effort going on just keeping the lights on. So for them, the quick wins in their environment were bring your own device. They wanted people to be able to, buyers, everyone else, to be out on site or visiting other people around the UK and be able to access in the first instance just Exchange. So we helped them implement an Exchange migration into the cloud, and really for them the benefits of it were really around the bring your own device policies, and that was the quick win for them. And as they've progressed since this project, they are now doing Lync and they're rolling out SharePoint as well as part of it. But ASOS, the quick win for them was really around the Exchange migration. Second one is a financial services or insurance organisation, domestic and general. So they were actually 2010, they're about 3,400 users in total. They're based all around Europe. And they insure white goods, so fridges, freezers. They also insure skyboxes, for example. They were on a hosted Exchange 2010 platform, which was coming to the end of their hosting contract, so they needed to move quickly off the service. So implementing Office 365, they were managed to move the data from one data center quickly into Office 365 and negate the costs that were going to hit them if they had gone over that time frame. But for them, it was all about standardization. And again, that the Exchange bit was the first piece in the puzzle for them, and they're now rolling out Lync and SharePoint as well as part of it. And it's quite an interesting one because they're an insurance organization, which you would assume have more policies and regulations, but they were still able to move to the Office 365 platform. The next one is Condé Nast. So Condé Nast are a global magazine publishing organisation. So they Vogue, Tatler, GQ. They've got lots of other magazines under that. They've got about 6,000 people worldwide, but their biggest problem was that they had quite a lot of Apple Macs in their organisation, and whilst their current systems worked fine, actually they needed something that worked a little bit better than what they were currently doing. Again, they started with Exchange, but now there's actually some public case studies available, but they're now looking at SharePoint and the Power BI capabilities of how they can actually take sources of information from different vendors, internal sources, and use natural language queries to be able to create graphs and interactive charts, all done via SharePoint. It's really, really powerful indeed. And the final organisation I'm going to talk about is Mothercare. So Mothercare had some issues because they had multiple email environments, but the biggest challenge they had is they had no way to share and collaborate information. So there were mistakes being made internally. There was lots of different versions of documents flying around, and the main thing for them was that every week they have exec briefings where the PAs to the directors would have to print out the exec packs for the board meetings, and quite often there'd be last minute changes, and these are 100-page documents or so. So what they looked at doing was deploying SharePoint to be able to help with this, and it not only has reduced all the mistakes, but it's also provided a new collaboration platform where they're starting to roll out company news and everything else. Alongside this, we also did an Exchange migration for them as well, so everyone's on the same platform. Again, this was just a brief overview of some of the organisations that have gone to Office 365. And if you do need any more details, then by all means, please ask at the end. So the next bit I'm going to talk about briefly is Fast Track. So with Office 365 as a whole, what you've got sitting in the Microsoft data centres is all of the infrastructure already set up. What this actually means is that you don't need to go through the process of setting up a whole load of infrastructure before you look to migrate. You can actually start testing out the service and understanding what it looks like, what it feels like, how your users are going to interoperate with it before you actually do any of the migrations themselves. So if you look at a traditional deployment mechanism, there would be a pre-deployment phase where you're sort of gathering information, understanding what the business needs, all these kind of things. There'd be a planning phase, as we talked about. So you would go through all of the business readiness stuff, making sure that everyone was fully aware about what was going to happen, making sure everything's planned properly, a prepare phase to make sure all the environment's up to speed, deploying additional infrastructure if necessary, and actually then migrating the first mailbox sometimes in week 10. Then you've got the post-migration, which is supporting this ongoing. But actually, because all of this infrastructure is already there, you're able to start testing out the service beforehand. So Microsoft have a promotion at the moment called Fast Track. What this allows you to do is actually get funding from Microsoft to assist with your deployment. From the pilot phase, so starting out with an environment that's totally disconnected from your on-premises environment, to understand what the administration functions look like, understanding what the user interface looks like, and actually starting to be able to build a business case based on something that's not connected to your environment whatsoever. Then you can start to integrate with this with your current on-premises solutions, understanding how you're going to do identity and access management, have users logging on with the same username and password on premises. But what this really means is that you're understanding what the value looks like before you've actually invested much effort in the solution. And again, there's lots of information about this, and we'd be more than happy to provide you with some of the information about how you can leverage funding from Microsoft to help with your Office 365 journey. So without further ado, I'm going to pass on to John.
So my name is John Gorton. I'm the Microsoft Licensing Practice Manager at Byte Software Services. I'm just going to take you through some of the basic licensing options for Office 365. So there are a number of options ranging from the consumer through small business all the way through to education. The piece we're going to focus on is the enterprise and the government space. So there is a mid-size business plan. So this includes a license for Office 365 Pro Plus, which is the client application that runs locally on your device. In addition to that, it also includes Exchange Online Plan 1 and SharePoint Online Plan 1 and also Lync Online Plan 1 and Plan 2 essentially, so giving you the full instant messaging and video and web conferencing. The mid-size business plan is only designed for users or organizations with between 10 and 300 users. It says 250 users on the slide there because there is a hard cap at 300 users. So if you're kind of approaching the 250 user mark, we would recommend that you look at the enterprise plans. So the enterprise plans, there are a number of different, there's 3 different plans available, or suites if you like, but essentially as Harriet described, they include a 50 gigabyte Exchange Online mailbox, there's link capabilities, there's Exchange Online and SharePoint Online, and also options of having the Office 365 Pro Plus license included as well. The enterprise plans also provide on-premises access rights. So the ability to take your Exchange Online Plan 1 or Plan 2 rights and use those to actually access your on-premises Exchange servers. There's also a kiosk worker plan. So this is addressing your deskless workers, if you like. So people that don't typically work at a desk all day. So this provides access to email and also SharePoint Online, although there isn't any storage with the SharePoint Online access. So looking at the 3 different enterprise plans, E1 includes the Exchange Online capabilities, Lync Online, and also SharePoint Online, but it's the kind of standard functionality that you would get from those 3 online services. It also includes Office Online. What's on the slide there is Office Web Apps, has now been renamed Office Online. So that's the ability to view and edit documents using a web browser. The E3 plan extends on the capabilities of E1, providing the enterprise level functionality of those 3 online services, and also includes the Office 365 Pro Plus subscription. With the E4, that then furthers the capabilities, adding the enterprise voice functionality of Lync. So some of the licensing benefits, if you look at the traditional model of licensing Office, it's always licensed on a per device basis. So every device that is either Office is installed onto or Office is used from, so for example if you are accessing a remote desktop services server running Office, the endpoint device that you're using Office on needs to have the license for Office there. You do have roaming rights, which is the ability to remotely access a copy of Office running on a server from outside of the corporate premises, but roaming rights is only available when you have software assurance on your Office license. Installation times typically tend to be longer, and there are some technical issues with running different versions of Office side by side on a single device. With the Office 365 model, it's licensed on a per user basis, and this allows a single user to use Office on up to 5 devices, so 5 Macs or PCs, 5 tablets, or 5 mobile phone or smartphone devices. The installation is much quicker because it streams down from the Office 365 portal via a click-to-run technology. And the updates, so there won't be any major kind of updates to the service as such. It'll just be kind of incremental updates which are automatically downloaded from the Office 365 portal. And it is possible, due to the way Office is deployed on the client, to run 2 different versions side by side on a single device. Now looking at the on-premises access rights, so maybe today you're only interested in using Exchange Online. What you could do is purchase an Office 365 E3 plan, and that would also provide you with access to Lync server, SharePoint server, as well as providing the enterprise functionality. So for example, the Lync functionality that you get within a standard client access license is the instant messaging and presence. The enterprise functionality would then further that to enable video and web conferencing. Similar with Exchange Online, so the Exchange Online Plan 1 or the standard functionality would be access to email, the calendar, the usual stuff that you would expect, and then the enterprise functionality furthers those capabilities by providing the archiving, the voicemail into the inbox via unified messaging and so on. So I guess the summary of that slide is, even if you're not looking to deploy the full suite of Office 365 applications and taking advantage of the online services, you could still use that Enterprise Plan 3 or Plan 4 suite to access your on-premises servers. And as I said earlier, with the Office 365 Pro Plus part code, that's licensed on a per-user basis, so further enables bring your own device. So to explain that in further detail, here we've got our corporate premises within the dotted line, and we've got our 3 users using multiple devices, so maybe some iPads, work PCs, and maybe a thin client. And on the servers, we've got Office running in either a virtual desktop or remote desktop services session. So as I described earlier, because each one of those devices inside or outside of the corporate premises is using Office, each one of those devices in the traditional model needs to have an Office license assigned to it. If we add software assurance to the licenses for the PCs, as you'll see, the license requirement for the users outside of the corporate premises disappears. And that's because of the Office roaming rights that those users have through software assurance. If we take a look at that same setup with Office 365 licenses, you'll see that now we're licensing the user. So it doesn't matter how many devices they're using, as long as they're limited to 5 concurrent devices. We're now licensing the individual users. So it can reduce costs actually to license the user as opposed to the individual devices. So again, you don't have to take advantage of the online services. You could just buy the Office 365 licenses to access your on-premises servers, or through just purchasing the individual component, which is the Office 365 Pro Plus Office license. The one gotcha on the Office 365 piece is the fact that those licenses don't provide downgrade rights. So you would be expected to use whatever is the current version. So currently in Office 365 it's the equivalent of Office 2013. As Microsoft release further updates to Office 365, again you would be expected to upgrade to the later versions. You can use the on-premises access rights to access lower levels of server products, but the Office client itself must be licensed or you must be using the later versions. There are also on the application side Visio for Office 365 and Project Pro for Office 365 options available there. So again, licensing those applications on a per user basis in exactly the same way as I've described on the Office 365 Pro Plus. So in terms of purchasing, you can, through an enterprise agreement or through Microsoft's new products and services agreement, purchase the individual applications as user subscription licenses, or as I described earlier, you could purchase those as one of those enterprise or mid-size business plans, so buying a suite of different services. If you're an existing Core Cal or Enterprise Cal customer, there are some offers that are available through the enterprise agreement and for larger customers, and through the Open Value and Open Value subscription agreements for small or medium-sized organizations. And that is buying an Office 365 add-on. So if you already own Core Cal or Enterprise Cal, Microsoft will allow you to purchase Office 365 E1, E3 or E4 at a discounted rate due to the fact you've already made the investment in the Core Cal or Enterprise Cal suite. So purchasing options for users or organizations with more than 250 users, if you were just buying Office 365 and not buying any other on-premises licenses, there you can purchase through an enterprise agreement with a minimum of 250 users. And because you're just buying Office 365 and no other products, you wouldn't need to commit to enterprise-wide. If you are buying other on-premises licenses such as Windows Enterprise operating system, then you would need to license all of the users in the organization. Then there's the Microsoft Online Services Portal. There's no minimum. It's a credit card, and there are invoice options, and generally it's a 12-month subscription term, but it is normally the most expensive way of buying Microsoft Online Services. Then for smaller and medium-sized organizations, there are the open license family. So 5 license minimum. There are 12-month subscription options. There's also options to just purchase through a subscription model through the Open Value Subscription License Agreement, or the various different open license agreements there are. And then back in December, Microsoft announced a new volume licensing program, part of their next generation volume licensing initiative, called the Microsoft Products and Services Agreement, or MPSA for short. This is a new agreement type which will allow you to purchase on-premises licenses in the way that you have been doing, maybe through a Select Plus agreement, but then also online services will also be part of those agreement types moving forward. So one of the most recent announcements was the availability of Office for iPad. So in terms of licensing, anyone can go onto the App Store and download Office for iPad and view Word or Excel documents. But for full editing capabilities, you need to have an Office 365 subscription. So I guess the key point to get the Office for iPad element, you need to have a license for Office 365 Pro Plus. So essentially any of the academic or commercial plans that include the Office 365 Pro Plus license will include the rights to use Office for iPad. One important point here, as you'll see on the consumer section there, where it says Office 365 Home or Office 365 Personal, there's an asterisk there which basically means that you can't use those licenses for commercial use. So if you've got your own users using Office for iPad because they've bought a consumer version of Office 365, that's not allowed to be used in a work environment.
If you are obviously looking at and considering Office 365, then now is also a good time to explore the training options that you have available to you. So why should you train your staff on Office 365? It will increase the user adoption, help staff realise the productivity they can gain from having the latest applications available to them. It can be tailored to the different user groups, such as the end users, if you have IT development or if you have IT technical staff. And there's also the flexibility of the delivery styles that can be delivered to suit your mobile workforce. So the flexible training styles could include classroom sessions, quick reference guides, or e-learning as well as another option to you. So we will also be sending you out some information around the training options with Bytes to you when we send you the recording of the webinar after the session. That's all from me for now. So we're now just going to open it up to questions. So if anybody does have any questions, please do feel free to pop those in the box, and we can then go through and answer those for you. I know that we have already had some questions come through, so I'll make a start on those as people pop their questions into the box. So I've had the first question here from Wayne, who asks, how does Lync work with calling a normal telephone if I want to use my existing calling plan?
Hi all, Harriet again. So with regards to Lync and being able to dial out, that functionality isn't available in Lync Online. So what you can do with Lync Online is there are 3 external audio conferencing providers, Intercall, PGI and BT, and they integrate with Lync Online and provide an audio conferencing service, so the ability to have a number as part of your Lync invite that goes to people outside of your organisation, which allows them to dial in, and the bridge functionality between them. If you require the dial out functionality, so interoperation with your current PBX, for example, that does require Lync's server on premises at this moment in time. I hope that helps.
Lovely, thank you. And a question from Mike who asks, how do you run a hybrid mode within the rollout so that some users are using Office 365 for email and others your own Exchange server?
That's a great question, Mike, and something that we talked about before, which was this idea of seamless operation between your on-premises Exchange environment and the Exchange Online service. So there are different migration approaches available depending on what your source platform is and how quickly you want to roll that out. If you've already got Exchange 2010 or 2013 on premises, you can deploy an additional 2010 or 2013 server, which essentially works as the mediation server between that environment. So without getting too technical, it uses the mailbox replication service, which is built into those servers to actually do those online remote moves between the platforms. So seamlessly from your environment to Office 365 and back the other way if you want as well. You can also do this with Exchange 2003 and 2007 environments as well. So 2010, you would deploy a 2010 server in order to do that, and with 2007, you have the option to do either 2010 or 2013. But again, it depends on, how quickly you want to migrate and, what your requirements are really, which determines the migration approach.
Lovely, thank you. And another question here, if a user loses or deletes an email, how can it be recovered if it has gone from the deleted items?
Hi Mike again. So in this scenario, the first thing to note is that if a user purges something from their deleted items, the administrator will have 14 days in order to recover that. However, that completely changes when we look at doing the in-place hold on the mailbox. That item, if it's purged from the deleted items, will go into a secret folder if that mailbox is on in-place hold, which means that that item is recoverable for the lifetime of your retention policy on that mailbox.
Lovely. And another question here. I've heard about the 365 contracts having data loss clauses that allow for a percentage of loss of your data. Is that true, and how can you guard against the loss of data for organizations, for global organizations?
Hi Mike, another good question. So Office 365 has 99.9% financially backed SLA, and there are guarantees against data loss within there. There are some other things that you can do if you did require to have a backup of that information on premises. There are workflows we can create if you're concerned about it. But ultimately, lots of organizations are looking at Office 365 as a solution to all of these problems, because actually there is, geographically dispersed locations. As I'm sure you're aware, you're selecting 2 data centers which are active, and at one point in time there will be multiple copies of that data within those data centers themselves. So actually when people look at this, the idea that data will be lost is sometimes negated in this environment versus what they currently have on premises. But again, it really depends on what your policies are, and if there is data that you have to have a copy of, a physical copy of, then we would look at doing a backup of that information if that was what you felt was necessary.
Lovely, thank you. And a question here, if you have Office 2013 already downloaded on desktops, do you need to redeploy it for the Office 365 Pro Plus migration, or is it just a license change?
So that one it depends. It depends on whether you have perpetual licenses for your Office 2013 licenses that you've deployed on each device. But essentially, if you want to take advantage of the per-user licensing model through Office 365, it would be a redeployment of using the Office 365 download.
Okay, lovely, thank you. And a question here from Phil who says, we have around 250 users, with at least half of those with mailboxes of around 5 gigabytes plus. But with archives of anywhere from 1 gigabyte through to 40 gigabytes plus, is it possible to import these archives into Office 365? If so, am I right in thinking that each user will have a 100 gigabyte archive and a 50 gigabyte mailbox?
Hi Phil. So again, this is a kind of a licensing question as well. So depending on the types of licensing that you go for, an e-license or an enterprise license, every user will get a 50 gigabyte mailbox. Now, on top of that, you have the option to deploy an unlimited archive. Now, you're right in thinking that that is set initially at 100 gigabytes, but the administrators can increase that exponentially, however big that you need to make that archive. Now, when you talk about PSTs import, yes, that is supported with Office 365. You know, obviously it's an Exchange platform, so you can just import PSTs. There are additional tools that you can use to automate that process, but it also depends on where that archive information sits. So if you're using Enterprise Vault or if you're using Mimecast or something else, you know, working out how you're going to get that data into Office 365 is really key.
Lovely, thank you. And a question here from Janny who says, are there any established migration services for existing Google Apps users, i.e. Gmail, Drive / Documents?
Hi, Danny, and the answer is yes, there is. So there are lots of different migration approaches, some native, some third-party that will do migrations, and it really is dependent on, you know, what content you currently have and how much you want to bring across with you. If you want to take everything, that's absolutely fine. This is something that we've gone through quite a few times with some of our clients who are migrating from similar services. So yes is the answer to that, but it depends on what you're trying to migrate and how much.
Lovely, thank you. And another question here from David Phillips who says, we currently have hosted Exchange with Rackspace. Is it easy to migrate? How seamless is it for users? Do the calendars, address books, etc. also get carried across?
Hi, David. You know, you're not one of the few that has a hosted Exchange environment. So again, it's dependent on the migration approach that you go for because there are different migration approaches. But yes, all of your calendars, tasks, contacts, everything will be taken across as part of the migration. And that's something that we really focus on because ultimately you don't want your users whinging about losing information that's important to them as part of the migration.
Lovely, thank you. And I think we've just got time for one more question. So we've got, Mike has asked, how does the on-premise backup of Office 365 work?
Hi, Mike. It really depends on what you're trying to create a backup of, really. As I said, for most of the organisations that we talk to, you know, some from 250 users up to tens of thousands, the Office 365 service is good enough for them and they don't want or don't need to have a backup of that information. Now, in some specific cases, there might be a specific reason. So some financial services organisations, for example, might want to take a specific copy of a SharePoint library, let's say. In that case, we would actually either look to create a workflow that publishes that content in SharePoint Online and back into the SharePoint on-premises environment, or if it's Exchange, keep that in a hybrid approach so you've actually got a copy of that in both places if necessary.
Okay, lovely, thank you. We have had quite a few questions come through. I think we've got time for just one more, and then obviously if we don't get through to answering all of your questions today, we will follow up with you and get in touch and follow up with those outside of the webinar. But there's one here that asks, is there an option to move data from the standalone OneDrive for Business to the Office 365 OneDrive?
Hi there. So the standalone OneDrive for Business, I'm assuming that you mean that you have purchased OneDrive for Business as a standalone product. Now, in fact, this is actually part of the Office 365 suite. So when you move from the OneDrive for Business that you currently have in that environment to the OneDrive for Business as part of 365, they're actually the same thing. Now, I'm obviously assuming that that's the case. So there's no migration of data because ultimately you're just adding the rest of the SharePoint environment around that OneDrive for Business. However, OneDrive for Business is also available on premises as well. If you're looking to migrate from one into the other, then we'd look to use a migration tool for that. I hope that's not too confusing, but I'm more than happy to follow up with you afterwards if that's something you want to investigate further.
Lovely, thank you. That's all the time we've got today for questions. Obviously, as I said, any questions that haven't been answered now, we will make sure we get in touch with you and follow up with those outside of the webinar. Thank you very much for joining us today, and we hope you join us for another webinar in the future.